In the last segment, I framed the NFL draft as a pressure test. This time I want to go one layer deeper, because once the noise is stripped away, the draft is not really just about talent. It's about capital allocation. It's about value. What do you value and why? And what are you prepared to pay to prove that you do? To me, that is the real draft conversation. Fans often talk about the draft as if it was simply a ranking exercise. Who did they like from college? Who's not so good? Who might be a star? Who might bust? But that is only the surface of it. For front offices, the draft is a market in belief. It is a series of decisions made inside constraint, salary cap constraint, roster constraint, positional scarcity, timing, coaching philosophy, age of your list, and the opportunity cost of every alternative you leave behind. So in this episode, I want to walk through a few simple tables that help explain why the draft is not just about finding talent. It is about pricing choices. Let's start here, because this is the operating system underneath all of it, the salary cap. If you want to understand why the draft matters, you have to start with the cap. This table shows the growth in the NFL salary cap since 2016, when the cap sat at $155.3 million. This year, it has risen to $301.2 million. That is growth of almost 80% across the period shown. Now, on one level, that sounds like abundance. The number gets bigger, so clubs have more room. But that is not really how the league works, because the cap does not remove pressure. It just changes the shape of it. As a top line rises, quarterback deals rise. Veteran expectations rise. Extensions expectations rise. Premium position pricing rises, and the cost of being wrong also rises. So the cap is not just a bookkeeping device. It is the architecture of roster building. It is why rookie deals matter. It is why draft value discipline matters. It is also why overpaying in one place can quietly distort the whole roster somewhere else. And this, to me, is one of the great business lessons in football. Constraint creates clarity. The cap forces every team to answer the hard questions. Who is worth premium money? Which positions bend the market? Where do you spend? Where do you economize? Where are you willing to take a cheaper rookie contract instead of a proven veteran? So before we get to the draft board, the first thing to remember is this. The draft matters because it sits inside a cap system. And in a cap system, every decision is connected. What goes to Peter cannot go to Paul. That is why value is never abstract. It always meets cost. So if the cap is a system underneath roster building, the next question is, what exactly is the product the system is trying to win in? This slide is simple but useful. It gives you a snapshot of the league as a competitive product. From last season, the winners and the losers in each division, and the gaps in winning percentage across both. So why keep a slide like this in a draft episode? Because the draft is not happening in a vacuum. Every selection sits inside a competitive map. Different teams are drafting from different timelines, different windows, different degrees of pressure, and different levels of roster maturity. A team at the top of the conference may be looking for one specific piece, or one cheap contributor, or one future-proofing move. A team lower down the curve may be looking for a foundational talent, someone who can lift all boats, a quarterback, a reset, a new core. And this is why one of the laziest mistakes in draft commentary is to pretend every team is solving the same problem. They are not. The same pick means different things depending on where a team sits in the cycle, whether their window is open or closing, whether the roster is top-heavy or balanced, whether the coach and general manager are buying time or spending it. So value is always contextual. The player may be the same, the meaning of a player is not. And that is one of the reasons the draft fascinates me. It tells you not only who teams like, it tells you how they see themselves. Now, to understand value properly, you have to understand structure, because football is not just a game of stars, it is a game of distribution. Where people line up, how roles interact, which positions shape outcomes most. This is a very simple slide, imagining an 11-on-11 structure. So on offense, we have 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, a couple of tackles, a couple of guards, a center, a quarterback, a fullback, and a halfback. On the defensive side, 2 corners, a free safety, a strong safety, 2 defensive ends, 2 defensive tackles, 3 linebackers. Why does this matter? Because not all positions carry the same strategic weight. Now that sounds obvious, but it is where almost every serious draft discussion begins. Quarterback is not just another player on the field. Our left tackle is not just another body. They play an incredibly important role protecting the blind side of the quarterback. A premier edge rusher is not just another athlete. They play an incredible role giving the opposition quarterback little time to make their decisions. Some positions touch the ball more, shape more plays, influence protection, distort opponent planning, hold more replacement difficulty, and carry more downstream impact. So when I ask, what do you value and why, this is where the question starts to become concrete. Football may be 11 on 11, but the market is not flat. That is why the draft is not a moral exercise in giving everyone equal respect. It is a strategic exercise in weighting roles correctly. This is also why the best draft rooms are not simply ranking talent. They are ranking talent through the lens of role value. What does this player do? How hard is that role to fill? How expensive is it in free agency? How much does it influence the system? And how replaceable is it later? They are much harder questions than is he good, and it's closer to the real one. Once you accept the positions are weighted differently, the next layer is this. What is the pick worth itself? Not the player, the pick. That is where draft capital enters. There is no formally designated league value for picks. Public charts exist, and franchises keep their own versions, sometimes adjusted for best player available, sometimes for need, sometimes for their own philosophical weighting. This means the chart is not really the story. The story is what your version of the chart says about you. What are you prepared to overpay for? Where are you disciplined? What do you believe is scarce enough to justify aggression? That is where identity shows up. This is one of the most useful simplifiers in the draft, the Jimmy Johnson draft chart. Now, the point of this chart is not that it is perfect, and certainly not that teams use it in the same way, but it gives a public language for understanding one critical truth. Movement has a price. At the top of the board, the value is huge. Pick 1 worth 3,000 points. Pick 2, 2,600. Pick 3, 2,200. By pick 5, you're at 1,700, and pick 10, 1,300. Pick 12, 1,200. By pick 23, you're at 760, and by 32, 590. Then once you move into day 2 and beyond, the value falls away quickly. Pick 33 is 580, pick 50, 400, pick 64, 270, and pick 100 is 100. And that is the read on the slide. The premium lives at the top. That is why trade-ups are so expensive. Not because people say they are, because mathematically the market tells you they are. If you move from 12 to 3, you are not just being aggressive. You are paying a very real capital premium to buy access, control, and certainty. And if you move down, you're not just playing it safe. You may be monetizing patience and turning one premium asset into multiple shots at value. But here is the important nuance. The chart is not the story. This is what your version of the chart says about you. Because every serious front office will have its own adjustments. Maybe it values quarterbacks more aggressively. Maybe it discounts certain positions. Maybe it has a stronger view on depth. Maybe it believes this year's class is unusually flat after a certain point. So again, the draft is not just about players, it is about philosophy made visible. The way a team uses value tells you how it thinks. Now, one of the reasons I have a Rams helmet behind me is it's signed by Jared Verse. If you look at the last 10 years, the LA Rams have given up their first round pick on every occasion except when they drafted Jared Verse. Now, that says a lot about their mindset. They are after more production. They want to understand what the player's done before and what they can deliver in their system, as opposed to paying the value of a first round pick and then being unsure of whether the young draftee is going to be able to make that jump and contribute in the first year under their system. But picks are not just values, they are also contracts. And that matters more than most people often realize. Rookie contracts round by round. This is where the draft becomes even more interesting because a draft pick is not just a prospect, it is a cost profile. This slide gives you a round by round summary. Now, what does that tell us? First, the biggest contract spread sits right at the top. That means if you draft very high, you are not only spending premium draft capital, you're also taking on a more expensive rookie deal. Second, once you move into later rounds, the cost narrows and the bets become cheaper. That is why a first rounder carries a very different kind of pressure than a fifth rounder, not just because of expectations, because of economics. And this is where the business parallel becomes very clean. In a capped system, every premium pick has a double cost. The pick you used, the contract slot you take on. So if you're building around an expensive veteran quarterback, the value of hitting on cheap rookie contributors rises. If you're still looking for a quarterback, the value of a rookie contract starter can transform the whole roster because it creates flexibility elsewhere. That is why the draft is not just about potential. It is about portfolio construction. And it is why the question, what do you value, must always be followed by, what does the value cost here in this window with this roster? Because a player is never just a player. He's a role, a contract, a timeline, a cap implication, and an opportunity cost. So if you strip this episode back to the bones, the draft asks 3 hard questions. What do you value? Why do you value it? And what are you prepared to pay to prove it? The salary cap tells you the system is constrained. The league table tells you the competitive map is contextual. The 11 on 11 structure tells you role value is uneven. The draft chart tells you movement has a price. And the rookie contracts remind you that every pick is also an economic decision. That is why the draft matters so much. Not because it is theatre, not because of the mock drafts, not because of the broadcast coverage, but because it's one of the clearest windows into how a franchise actually thinks and sees themselves. It's hierarchy, it's discipline, it's appetite for risk, it's understanding of costs, it's willingness to buy certainty, it's belief in where value really lives. And that, to me, is the real point. The draft is not a talent show. It is a market in belief. This is Goal and Inches.